Hey everyone, welcome to Cyber Conversations, the show where it's okay to agree to disagree. Today we're talking about Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith. I got my friend Vern here, and I'm Josh, and
Oh,
we're, I've been anticipating this because even though we kind of agree on Revenge of the Sith, we both like it, but uh, I know that it's not your favorite of the prequels. Is it your least favorite?
negative. Is it my least favorite?
Of the prequels alone, just those three.
That's a tough one. It's really a toss up between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith for me. They're both dense.
Yeah,
Revenge of the Sith is the most gut wrenching of all of them,
yeah,
and
yeah.
sometimes that actually comes into as a factor for me when it comes to gauging how I like a movie, or where it sits on the list of my favorites.
Yeah. Well, this movie is definitely dark. It's about as dark as Star Wars gets. It is my favorite of just the prequel trilogy. But that's not because of the subject matter. It's because, as we've discussed before, it's kind of a low bar to clear. I'm not a fan at all of the Phantom Menace. I have more appreciation of it now than I did
Whoa, 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 whoa! Let me correct you there. It's not a high bar to clear in your mind.
in my. Yes, of course. I'm
There
talking
you
about.
go.
Well,
Okay.
yeah. I thought that was. I'm sorry, my apologies.
Implied.
In my
That's
in
all
Yeah, I
right.
thought that I made that, clear. I'm talking about my thoughts. I felt like it was a
Understood.
low bar to clear. And that's not to say I didn't like the Phantom Menace. I like it more now than I used to. I appreciate
We
it,
talked about that.
but I don't like it as much. And Attack of the Clones, I only like it a little bit more than the Phantom Menace. So by
Well,
the
I think you're in the vast majority of public opinion, and not in the I really like the original, but not crazy about the prequels camp. Like universally, it seems almost universally among the fans, I hear that Revenge of the Sith is his favorite prequel movie,
Yeah.
and that could be all by itself a reason why I don't want it to be my favorite movie because I always do the opposite of what everybody else does. But truthfully, like I think that Revenge of the Sith is less of a war movie, even though it does really start out as a war movie. And I think that all by itself has to be put it into my least favorite. I think Revenge of the Sith might be my least favorite, but it's not a strong opinion. It's teetering on the edge. But I think I like Attack of the Clones better,
I think
mainly
oh, sorry.
mainly because of the lack of gut wrenchingness.
Yeah. See, I don't know. I can't speak for other people. I am gonna guess that a lot of people liked it because of how dark it gets. They love Darth Vader. He's always been an iconic bad guy, and now we finally get to see him.
Yeah.
And I think that they're happy because they get in this day and age, people love to celebrate villains, which is something that I'm not gonna understand. I see it all the time.
Exactly. That in that sense, we're on the same page, and there may be a lot of listeners out there that are on the opposite camp because it seems really common.
Yeah, my own daughter, like we watched all the Harry Potter movies, and she wants to be a Slytherin. She roots for Slytherin. She thinks that they're the best people because they're the most interesting. And I'm just like,
Yeah, and I don't mean to read into something too deeply, but in my mind, that's disturbing
yeah,
because nothing about Slytherin in the four movies or five movies was presented as something that is positive or lovely or productive. These are skulking, dark, shadowy figures that don't give a crap about anybody around them and are hungry for power and to serve someone who is going to crush everything beneath his boot. I don't think that's something I would want to emulate, and I'd be worried if Rachel was emulating that.
well, I don't know if she emulates it. I think she was that way because she felt it was cool. I don't know. I read the books.
Cool.
I don't know. I read the
Yeah.
books. So to me, Slytherin isn't as awful as you make it out to be, as the movies made them out to be. There are a lot of redeeming qualities
Yeah. I
that
only read the
Slytherin
first
has.
Harry Potter book. I've never read the whole series.
Yeah, and there are quite a few really good individuals who are good guys, even though they're Slytherin.
Namely,
Well, in a way, Snape is always a good guy. He's a Slytherin, and he does
good
something
point.
very good.
Point. Touche.
Also,
Yep.
Also,
He is very dark and creepy and greasy and just
he doesn't
loathsome
treat
in some ways,
Harry.
but
Yeah, and
he's really not a he's tough on everybody.
he's tough on
And
everybody, but particularly
he
Harry.
never really betrays the cause of good. You know,
Yeah,
he
yeah.
wants to maintain the balance.
Yeah, and for what it's worth,
Okay, all
also
right.
he started as a loyal Death Eater to Voldemort until Voldemort killed Lily, uh, Harry Potter's mother, and that's kind of what drove him to to confide in Dumbledore and turn against Voldemort. He's not a good
Welcome to
person.
Cyber Conversations featuring Harry Potter,
Well,
the
that's
Harry Potter
something I wouldn't
series.
mind
It
talking
begins
about
right
too.
here, right now.
But also another since you asked, another Slytherin who seems to be a very good character is Slughorn, Professor Slughorn. He's a Slytherin and he fights against Voldemort, even
Don't
even
recognize
with
him.
he was well he was introduced in the sixth book, I believe, and movie. In any case, yeah, I wouldn't mind doing a Harry Potter series, but today we're talking about
Well, as
Star
long as
Wars.
you're on, long as you're on about doing major pop culture series to mine opinions and differences and similarities, Harry Potter's going to have to be on the list eventually.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
So
but
episode 3,
so yeah, episode 3 for
it's
me
your
is
favorite, my least favorite
yeah
of the
of
original
the original
trilogy, which is
trilogy.
not very flattering, but it's if you have to put them in the categories, okay,
Yeah.
that's accurate.
Well, if I mean, I know I'm in the minority that I prefer all three of the sequels to any of the prequels,
Yeah, we know that.
but I know that's an unpopular opinion. So, but we'll explain it when we get there. So,
Yep.
uh,
Start with the opening
oh,
crawl.
but I did want to mention real quick because we talked about this in our last when we were talking about episode 2, and we were wrong. Um, we were talking about how it would have been great if George Lucas had Carrie Fisher helping him as a script doctor because he really
Hmm.
needed it because he doesn't know how to write romance. Well, it's time for our foot and mouth disease because she was script doctoring prequels. Personally, if I were George Lucas and if I were the PR team, when these movies came out, I would have had her name in just as bold letters as George Lucas, saying written by George Lucas and Carrie Fisher or something to that effect. But here we are, what is it, 30 years later, and well, almost, and I just found this out that she worked on the prequels. So that that is
Cool.
the missed opportunity. We thought it was a missed opportunity that he didn't bring her in, but it turns out he did bring her in. The missed opportunity was not making it more public. But
Yeah, I didn't know that. All these years, it's been like 25 years, and I've never heard anybody say that.
yeah.
So I've
So
never
just in
looked it up.
case anyone was upset about the fact that we were completely wrong saying that they didn't bring in Carrie Fisher, this is my apology to you. We were wrong. Carrie Fisher did actually work on script doctoring the prequels. So anyway, back on course. Episode 3 has
Yep. You got anything to say about the opening crawl?
I never liked the fact that it starts with war, but that's a minor
You
gripe.
know what? It has it really has a Clone Warsy kind of opening feel to it. It's like I can almost hear the 1940s style announcer that opens up every single Clone Wars episode reading the
Yeah.
crawl at the beginning of episode 3.
Yeah, that was the impression I got immediately the first time I watched it. I was like that I heard it in a 1940s announcer's voice,
Right,
you
right.
know.
You could almost see the WAR exclamation point
Yeah.
in large block font letters at the top of a newspaper.
Yeah. And for that, I kind of appreciate it if that's what George Lucas was trying to do. But I wasn't expecting it, and I thought that it was badly
Yeah,
written
yeah,
because it
yeah.
was hokey. But
Comes off a little cheesy. Yep.
yeah. But
Especially if
that's
you haven't got 7 years of Clone Wars under your belt,
yeah. But I will say,
which no one did at the time.
though, this is not a complaint of mine, just a
Yeah,
minor gripe.
yeah,
Other than
yeah.
that,
That's something I can honestly, openly admit is cheesy and not feel like I'm insulting Star Wars because Star Wars is Flash Gordon, man.
yeah,
It's Saturday morning matinee, theater from like the 50s. It's supposed to be crazy, whacked out, comic booky. It has cheese all over it from beginning to end.
Yeah.
That doesn't take away from its coolness, its drama, its power, its meaning.
There's something to be said for the right amount of cheese.
Yeah, I agree.
So
I agree. I mean, for the record, I'm the kind of guy that loves movies like Kroll and Flash Gordon. I mean,
yeah,
those are fantastic movies to me. Not campy, give me my popcorn, I'm going to smile for 2 hours and have fun. Fantastic movies. They're deeply imaginative and totally unique. And I put Star Wars in that.
yeah, yeah. Um, but the production quality is higher.
Yeah, well, production quality helps.
Yeah.
That
And I
makes a
think
difference between.
and
But I
I
can get
think
over production quality. If you give me a good story, I can forgive some special effects flaws. If you give me something incredibly beautiful that just isn't well written, it's a lot less attractive. And I think
well, that's
I'm probably in the vast majority when it comes to that opinion.
well, I think that's exactly why I felt the way I did about the Phantom Menace. It was a beautiful package that it didn't. I felt like it didn't have a good story.
Well, I
But
disagree, but
no,
we
no,
are
I know
different.
we've already talked about that, but that's just because that's something that you said that reminded me of it.
Yeah.
With Revenge of the Sith, I think part of why I liked it wasn't the fact that it was so dark or that it focused on Darth Vader. What I liked about it was it just felt like a more cohesive and interesting story to me. But that's not to say I don't have complaints. I said before, and I still maintain, I think that if it had been me, I would have preferred not to have episode one at all. Episode two would have been the beginning of the prequel trilogy, and episode three would have been split into two parts. With the first half, one movie showing the fall of Anakin, culminating with him turning to the dark side, and then episode three for me would have been the starting with Order 66 and the escape of the Jedi and the beginnings of the Empire, under the Emperor and Darth Vader. That's, I think, how
Well,
I would
I'm
have done
glad
it.
you weren't in charge of the trilogy because then we wouldn't have had Phantom Menace. It's a great movie.
Well, but
But
that's
you want to talk about slamming it open full throttle in the very beginning of the movie. The opening scene of the Jedi starfighters, which we've already seen before,
oh, we hadn't
but
seen them in
now we're
action.
seeing them
Yeah,
in action. Yeah, the placement of the droid control ships, we've got a lot of like prequel familiar starfighters and capital ships all involved in this thing. I love the three dimensionality. There's like a familiar Star Wars shot where you're like over the shoulder of the pilots and the ships the little fighters are like full frame, and then there's a pivot of the camera and it's like a vertigo inducing shot where you're looking straight down at Coruscant and there's layers and layers of these capital ships all engaged in this battle. It's
yeah.
spectacular, the first 5 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, that opening shot with the one take of the camera. I mean, I don't really know if that's accurate since it's not a real camera, since a lot of it is CGI. But it looks like one shot, and
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
even see Obi-Wan and Anakin in their respective fighters
Yep.
as we zoom in on them.
Yep. And
Yeah,
I will say, in reflection to the popular opinion for all three movies, that if anything ruins the scene, it's the dialogue that's going on inside the cockpits.
mhm,
I don't know why it just, um, it feels a little jarring that you go from this, sweeping documentary shot of, some journalistic ship that's following the Jedi starfighters from the outside in space, and then you cut to the actors sitting in cockpits in a studio, and they're making the commentary. And I don't know why it's jarring. I do. Do you feel the same way about that? The opening sequence
possibly
there and the dialogue.
Possibly a little bit because, I get into watching the ships and the battle going on around them, and then all of a sudden it's focused on Anakin, and I can't see anything else because it's another flat shot of him, and there's not much they can do. I'm not complaining about the fact that it's a flat shot. There's not much you can do when there's limited room, but I mean, it's in homage, I think, to the other pilots that we've seen from the very first movie. A shot of their face. in the cockpit, but
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
I
but
didn't
it's
really
very Star
feel
Warsy. It's
yeah,
very Star Warsy in the sense that every single time you see a Star Wars movie with fighters, you're gonna cut from the exterior shots to the cockpit shots.
yeah. And I'm sure that the
But it's
whole
something about the dialogue just doesn't feel natural. It continues in the ship too.
yeah,
When they
some of
get
it
into the ship, the like most of the dialogue between Anakin and Obi-Wan feels very forced.
there's a few weird things like the thing with like Anakin, like I'm sure that George Lucas was trying to show off how great a pilot Anakin is, but part of it has always been like I have trouble seeing the Jedi as fancy pilots in starships because I see them as knights with a glowing sword, and
Yeah, but
you know,
way back in the very
oh
first
yeah, yeah,
movie, we find out that Anakin is the best fighter in the
yeah,
galaxy. So
I'm not complaining. It's
pilot,
just it was something that maybe that was a little bit jarring too. In any case, I think that the whole reason for that battle was to show Anakin using all these skills, and Obi-Wan was kind of flailing about and not as effective at flying his ship, which is why his ship gets damaged. But
and that's why I think it feels forced because
yeah,
Anakin really doesn't do a whole lot of fancy flying. He
exactly.
does the maneuver with getting the buzz droids off, but
Yeah, even that
all
doesn't
that
work
does
out
is
that well.
transfer it does not really,
Yeah,
no, and it doesn't really require a whole lot of fancy flying.
yeah,
The Gendy Tartakovsky animated series does more to establish Anakin's prowess as a starfighter than Revenge of the Sith does.
yeah.
Anakin's got some badass maneuvers in that cartoon. And it would have been really cool to see something like that in live action.
Yeah, in
But
the
it
live
just
action, we actually see Anakin mess up because Obi-Wan's got the buzz droids on him, and Anakin takes a couple of shots at them and actually, singes off one of the wings.
and
And
maybe that is primarily to let R2, get a chance to be a hero. I think maybe that's why that was. But if that's true, then it's like it doesn't really solve the problem because that is a plot device, and it's like, oh well, that's why it's forced.
yeah,
That's what force means, is that it's like wedged into something that would have happened
yeah,
or that would have been cool to see because that we're trying to establish something for an existing character or whatever.
yeah. So yeah, I agree. But I enjoyed seeing it at least. I think that the whole thing was well done overall. But yeah, some of
Spectacular.
the
Yep.
dialogue wasn't great, and I do love the shot when they crash land in
And Anakin launches out with his lightsaber drawn.
Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
Oh, wait,
Oh,
no,
is it Obi-Wan?
it
Yeah,
was
you're right.
Obi-Wan because his ship was
Yeah,
crashing.
you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and Obi-Wan cementing himself as my favorite character when he does that jump, flip, and destroys a couple of battle droids on his way down. Um, yeah, I love that. Um, I
Then they
and
get in the elevator, and the elevator shuts down, and Obi-Wan is like, "How did this happen? We're smarter than this." It's the dumbest line. It's
yeah,
so
that was
forced.
that wasn't in the elevator though. That was when they got caught by the
Oh,
ray
that's when they
shields.
had the ray shield. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right. The ray
but
shields.
yeah, you're right with the elevator too. I mean, uh, Anakin cuts through the ceiling and goes jumping off, and Obi-Wan's like always on the move, which the way he delivers it is excellent because I really felt like he was channeling Alec Guinness. Just the way he said it sounded
Yeah,
like a
I
young
agree.
Alec Guinness, but at the same time, it's kind of like, why? Who are you speaking to? And the whole comedy thing with R2, and we got to get the elevator going. Oh, wait, we're supposed to go up. What are you doing? And R2, meanwhile, is pouring oil to cause the those other battle droids. What are they? The
Super battle droids.
yeah,
It is cool to see R2 take two of them out, but kind
yeah,
of cheating, but it still he does. It's a cool move on R2's part.
yeah,
There's a deliberate attempt to get R2 his hero moments, and he's a favorite. I want to just paste a little bit of forgiveness over the top of some of these critiques because everything we've seen so far absolutely has 10-year-olds at the edge of their seats.
yeah,
It is very, very cool, very, very fun 10-year-old entertainment, 12-year-old entertainment,
mhm,
14-year-old entertainment. And that's primarily what it's supposed to be. It feels like a Saturday morning cartoon.
yeah. then I'm not sure why they had to have Anakin say when they're talking about R2, and he's like, he's trying. And I'm kind of like, bitch, R2 has been doing this longer than you've been alive. But
Emotional response, Josh.
yes. But in any case,
Yeah. Then they make it up to the Chancellor, and he is quote unquote kidnapped. He's quote
yeah.
unquote in bonds, and the whole thing is a staged setup. In fact, we
Well, it's the
don't
same
have the
chair
benefit
too,
of.
or it looks like the same chair as we would see
Yeah,
later
yeah,
on in
yeah, very
Return of
familiar.
the Jedi. And then,
Definitely an homage. We
yeah,
don't have the benefit when we see the movie of the backstory because the Clone Wars actually covers the abduction of Palpatine,
yep.
and so this ends up becoming the climactic battle of the Clone Wars, basically the battle that ends the Clone Wars.
And again, this is kind of why I wish that they had done things the way I said, because we could have had a lot more of the Clone Wars going on if we had had a two-part movie of what we ended up getting as episode 3. Um,
Yeah, but instead we got 7 years of animated
well,
show,
we still could have
so
got that.
that's
There's no way we
okay.
could have fit all that 7 years into 2 movies, but to have something pivotal like that, I don't know. I just
It does kind of rush through. I think maybe that's where some of the cheese
that's the
comes from.
thing.
Is
That's
that it's like the beats are so fast, and it's like just moving from plot, device to plot device to get to the point where we can wrap this whole thing up within the first 15 minutes of the movie.
yeah. I mean, my biggest complaint overall, I mean, of Revenge of the Sith is how quickly things go from Anakin being the war hero to Anakin being the villain happens way too quick because he has to get it done in the first like half of the movie. A little
Yeah.
over halfway through the movie is when it all happens. So, it's very abrupt. And
Yeah,
and
from
I
the
and
time that we first see the Jedi starfighters in space to the moment that Anakin hugs Amidala on the surface, that whole thing feels like it takes place in an afternoon. Like it's literally that evening that he's with his wife.
yeah.
And so that's the first 15, 20 minutes of the movie, and you've only passed through an afternoon. So it doesn't feel like the movie spans a long period of time.
Yeah. And my biggest complaint was that Anakin in Attack of the Clones, he was primarily a good guy, with the exception of the fact that he felt Obi-Wan was holding him back. He was having these teenager moments where he'd lash out. He got really angry and killed a bunch of sand people for killing his mother. But overall, he was a good guy the whole time. And we get reintroduced to him. He's still a good guy. And in the span of half a movie, he goes from being a good guy to being one of the worst guys. I felt like that whole thing was rushed.
Well,
Um,
he's not entirely a good guy at the beginning of the movie. I mean, he
no,
does have
he
long hair.
good one. Yeah, the only thing he needed was a tattoo of an anchor.
I'm sure he had one. I'm
Yeah,
sure of it. That's Saturday morning cartoon thinking. You know what I
yeah.
mean? It's is it fair to say? And I'm going to say this very cautiously because I have a lot of respect for George Lucas. I believe he's a modern genius.
Mm.
But is it possible that for if you're writing for Saturday morning cartoons, pretty soon you get to a point where all you can do is write for Saturday morning cartoons. All you can do is write like it's a Saturday morning cartoon. Does that make sense?
Maybe. But I think the other thing that I had meant to say before when I said part of the reasons why I like this movie more than the previous two is because the previous two seemed to throw in a lot of excess alien types that were not necessary to the movie, and I always felt like it was George Lucas putting in stuff that he could turn into toys and sell. This was a movie where it finally felt like George Lucas was trying to tell us a story, and he wasn't concerned with making action figures and dolls. Um,
I don't know if that's fair.
I don't
I
know,
honestly don't think that's
but
fair.
that was. I'm not
I,
saying
I
that's
think I
true.
think
I'm
that
just
like what do you expect him to do? Not introduce the Star Wars universe?
no, no,
Not
no.
flesh it out?
I'm
That's what he's doing in the first two movies is he's fleshing out the Star Wars universe. And yes, it does create new cool things that we can make toys.
Yeah, but it was the impression I got. I'm not saying that he
Okay,
necessarily did this,
understood.
but the
Okay, that makes
impression I
sense.
got, my biggest impression of Jar Jar was here's a cartoon character that we can make dolls out of and sell to kids. When we got Attack of the Clones, it felt like there was less of it, but there was still a bunch of creatures that we could turn into toys and lots of ships that we could turn into toys and models and stuff. But episode 3, I didn't get that impression. It felt like he was back on track
Yeah,
telling
that makes
stories.
sense too, because everything is in not back on track, but everything is in place.
Yeah.
All the pieces are in place. Now all you have to do is move them across the board.
Yeah. So, but that was my stance. In any case,
Okay.
um the lightsaber fight I thought was good. It was still, for me, too many fancy moves that I don't like, but it wasn't as bad as the Duel of the Fates that we got in the Phantom Menace, but it wasn't as dark as Attack of the Clones, where we just saw shadows lit by lightsabers. Um, Pretty good moves by Count Dooku, and I always am happy to see Christopher Lee return. Although I did feel like he was underused. Even though I knew that he had to be killed off and written out of the movie as quickly as possible, when I watched it, I got the impression that Christopher Lee either didn't want to be in it much or didn't have time or maybe they didn't want to pay him enough. And so he seems like he gets in and they get him out of there as fast as possible. He barely has any lines. But considering we had this whole big intro with a whole movie that was about Dooku and didn't have Grievous in it at all, so now they have a brand new character that they have to introduce us to, and we have to get to the point where he dies as well. So yeah, I agree, and that's, like I said, my biggest complaint about this movie is that it feels so rushed. And if they had split it into two
Mhm.
movies, this wouldn't have been a thing, because it was that was jarring to me. This lightsaber fight between Anakin and Obi-Wan and Dooku has almost no dialogue to begin, and every other lightsaber fight in the Star Wars saga, they always lead up by having them taunt each other or saying, you're not going to get away. They do say that, but it's like really quick. They say like we're
Also, I think it should be. Uh,
Go ahead.
oh,
Also,
I I think it should be said that when the movie first came out, we did not have the benefit of knowing all of the things that had led up to this, the
right,
Clone
right,
Wars.
yeah,
And so it really does, like when they come together, it's like they are they're done with talking. Like I'm counteracting what you're saying by saying that I think there is a feel for that like they've done a lot of talking, and like the dude has stepped way over the line at this point, and there's the Chancellor right there, and we've got 99.9% victory at this point. All we have to do is cross this over.
yeah.
Like I
But
didn't
also, like,
understand how complex the Clone Wars were, but right off the bat I got the impression that, oh, okay, these guys are, they've already had their negotiations.
but like
Let's go at it.
But like if you look at most of the other lightsaber fights, they have a little bit of dialogue. This one, they basically say like, "You're not going to get away, Dooku. This time, we're going to take you down." And then there's a shot of Dooku where he is holding perfectly still. He ignites his lightsaber, but other than that, he doesn't move a muscle. And I feel like it was George Lucas telling him just stand there, because like any extra movement would have been extra money. I don't know if that's the case, but that's what it felt like to me. He doesn't move a muscle. The lightsaber ignites, and then there's the lightsaber fight. He doesn't say a word, and I felt like he would have said something. Um,
Yeah,
and that was
I
something that, with the very first time I watched it in the theater, I was almost like, "My God, did they just put a jump there for no reason? Like, did the film skip?" Because I was so expecting him to say something before he swung his lightsaber, but he didn't. He just they're going at it. But then the fight was cool. They did what they needed to. They got Obi-Wan down so that he could, try to crush him with the platform. Um,
Oh yeah, about that.
mhm.
That's the battle was fine to me. I didn't really expect Dooku to say much, but now that you mention it, it is maybe a little disappointing that he didn't, have more to say before the fight started. But but when he brings that heavy
Yeah, it
catwalk
looks
down
like
on
it should
Obi-Wan,
cause more damage.
yeah, he may be a Jedi, but you like when he can't lift it off himself, and when it gets lifted off of him, it feels like it is, a ton, and it
Mm.
looks like it's cutting into his leg. He is a human, so even though he's a Jedi, and even though they might have Star Warsy medical facilities in the Jedi headquarters, in that moment, it feels like he should have had a twisted knee, a snapped shin bone, something that would have been a little more severe than him just bouncing right back
If
up and
I
being fine.
recall
But
correctly, and
Saturday morning cartoon.
if I recall correctly, and I'm not watching the movie right now, but I could have sworn when that platform crashes down on him, he actually slides a little bit on the floor. So I just imagine there would be
Yes,
a
yes,
blood
it presses
smear.
into him.
Yeah, I would imagine there's a
Yep.
blood smear hidden under that platform somewhere.
Yeah.
But no, he's fine.
Yeah, that thing should have taken him out. And but it would have been cool though, because if he would have got up and there would have been blood on his white pants and he would have limped all the way back, and the rest of the situation, he would have limped. He was sitting in a chair doing nothing while Anakin was doing all the piloting in the bridge cockpit.
Yeah.
So he could have been seriously hurt. And it would have been cool to see the two of them had just survived this climactic battle and they didn't both come out at 100%.
Yeah.
Obi-Wan's going to go straight to the medical bay, and they'll probably have him healed by tomorrow, but he still almost lost his leg on that
And
one, and that
and
would have
this would
been,
have
I don't it would have been so easy to carry across. It
and
would have been it would have been a handful of red dye smacked onto his pants, and then Ewan
and then we wouldn't have that
acting it out.
ridiculous
That's all.
dialogue about now no, you handle the diplomats. It's your turn. It's like, come on. Because that was written badly.
We may have still had that ridiculous
No, because
dialogue.
he because if Obi-Wan was hurt, he would have been rushed off to a bacta tank, and Anakin would have had no choice but to talk to the politicians and the news people.
Yeah, that would have been a
Like
reasonable
that would
reason
have
to
been
get
how he
Anakin
could
over
have.
where they wanted him to be.
Yeah, I think that would have been a good idea. Have Obi-Wan actually injured to give real weight to how much trouble Dooku was to kill. And then that also gives a reason for Obi-Wan to not be there so that Anakin can talk to the politicians and then sneak into the back so that he can talk to Padme and act like they're not married, even though they're right out in the open kissing and, is that their idea of hiding?
Yeah, well, they were behind a pillar,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, th
The
you
the
could
the, the
argue that they
Rolls
were behind
Royce of
several pillars.
the Rolls Royce of camouflage.
It looks like it was a slightly shadowy, part of the pillared colonnade, and
Yeah.
they were behind the
Can't
pillar.
let anyone
And
find
and and
out
I
about
and I
this.
can tell you for certain, until C-3PO walked in, I can tell you for certain there was not a soul within the frame. So, I think that covers it. I think
Yeah.
they were
Yeah. Well, I mean, the point is, if there was paparazzi, then you know that they would have been on the tabloids.
or flying cameras
Yeah.
or security cameras.
The Inquirer said Jedi and Senator hook up. Is it the truth?
Well,
Inquiring
I
minds
I
want
would
to
think
know.
that I would think that Anakin and Padme, of all people, would know exactly where the safest place to get away from prying eyes would be, both in the council building, whatever you call that gigantic mushroom, and in the Jedi Temple.
Yeah. Well, in any case,
Do
yeah.
we ever see? Wait a minute. Do we ever see Padme in the Jedi Temple? We don't.
No, no, she never goes there.
It's not.
No.
Nope. Nope. Of course not. So this giant column porch, whatever it is got to be somewhere around the Capitol building,
But of
the
course,
Senate
the
building.
the really big deal that everyone was talking about, of course, was the fact that we saw the Millennium Falcon for about 2 seconds.
Yeah. Well, there's lots of little Easter eggs.
Yeah. So he's happy that they're going to have a kid. She's happy. They're all in love. Yay. And then we go to, what was it? Oh, well, so now we have, the Chancellor has already said he's not going to stop, he's not going to step down and he's not going to stop the attacks until Grievous is found, and Mace Windu says we're going to make it the top priority because we got to take down Grievous because we got to end the Clone Wars. And then we have what comes next?
And
Well,
Grievous is defeated and on the run. So there's never been a better moment in the Clone Wars where Dooku is gone, Grievous is on the run. All they have to do is locate him, and they can actually end the war that started X number of years ago.
yeah,
We know bit based on the series, but like when the movie came out, we had no idea how long this war had been raging, other than the fact that you can see the relative time difference in Anakin.
yeah.
Funny thing is,
I
the
think they said it
Anakin that
was like
was the
3 years,
Christian,
right? I
the
think they
the
actually
the
said at some point that the Clone Wars lasted 3 years, or there was a 3 years
that
difference.
sounds about right.
Yeah,
The Hayden Christensen from the first from the Clone Wars,
yeah.
and the Hayden Christensen from Revenge of the Sith, those two guys in between was Ahsoka's whole story,
Mhm.
and that's also something we don't have the benefit of when we first see this in the movie theater. There's
Yeah,
not even a mention of her.
yeah. Well, because
I'm
she didn't
presuming
exist
because she
yet.
wasn't actually anybody's. Yeah, she wasn't any. Well, she did in
No,
in
no.
the
I mean,
story
like,
universe, but not
yeah,
in
but
our universe.
she hadn't been created yet. As far as I know, even George Lucas hadn't thought of her yet. So,
No, I don't think so.
I would have loved to
That'd
see
be
her.
interesting to confirm or deny.
Yeah. I mean, I've said it before. She's one of my favorite characters. I think she's my second favorite Star Wars character of all time.
Yeah, mine too. Yeah, mine too. I really didn't like her at first.
Well,
I
yeah,
think
she
that's real
wasn't
common.
likable at first.
In
She looks
fact,
like,
Filoni did that on purpose. We're off subject, but
yeah,
Filoni does deliberately designed her to be annoying so that she would be a dynamic character and have a journey. Unfortunately, it's jarring if you don't see it coming,
yeah,
and you just end up with this, annoying, headstrong character.
yeah. I mean, that's
But
the
she's
biggest, my
definitely
biggest
one of those historical badasses.
for anyone here listening who hasn't watched the Clone Wars but thinking of it, you should definitely watch the Clone Wars, and you do need to start with the movie.
It's a big
But I
commitment.
will say the movie is not good. It's not that great. So, like, don't judge the whole show based on that movie. Um, Ahsoka gets introduced in
Oh,
the
the
movie, so it's
original
kind of,
movie.
yeah. Ahsoka gets introduced in it,
Yeah.
and she is annoying, but she shows a lot of promise. But like, mostly she's annoying. She looks like she's on her way to spring break with that not T top, with that barely there top.
She's
And
she's
just
just a kid. She's like
yeah,
12 years old in that movie, and
yeah,
keep in mind she was deliberately written to be an annoying character,
yeah.
and so that's part of the plan. You can actually look that up and
But even if
confirm
you
that
look at
Filoni
like the
has
whole movie,
said it
like
himself.
even the movie, like the rest of the movie, aside from Ahsoka, with the thing with the huts and the that baby hut, and like the movie
Oh
isn't
yeah,
great.
there's so much. It's really made for kids.
Yeah, the movie isn't
I
great,
I
but
I
it,
was really I liked it. It was Star Warsy. It was more Star Warsy goodness,
yeah,
but it really rubbed me the wrong way as being just like Star Wars for kids.
yeah,
And I wasn't ready for that, although we have even kiddier Star Wars now. But the series has a much more serious tone than
yeah.
the
I
movie
do
did.
recommend watching the series, though. Not for nothing. Season 3 is when it starts getting a lot better. The first 2 seasons, I think, were
It's a
mostly
big commitment.
misses. And in season 3, there's like a part
I
halfway
disagree for
through.
the record.
What, you thought that the whole thing was great, or like I'm
Yeah.
not
Oh,
saying like
I think
I
episode
enjoyed
1
all
is
of it.
fantastic. I love episode 1.
No, no,
It
wait.
kicks off real strong, and the first couple seasons are really enjoyable, and it does get better and better, literally all the way to the seventh season. I think the only other series I can think of that got better and better for 7 seasons is Star Trek: The Next Generation. But Clone Wars pulls it off. Just hang in there because it gets better and better.
Yeah, I'm not saying that like seasons 1 and 2 are awful. They are good, but I felt like there were more misses than hits in the first 2 seasons. In season 3,
Yeah,
there's a notable point where you'll see it if you're watching them because they got a major upgrade in their computer animation. I don't know if it was because they got new computers or what happened. Maybe the budget just went up.
No, I think it was a new technique where they started hand painting. We take it for granted now with like Arcane and stuff like that, like with the Into the Spider-Verse, this new animation style where it looks choppy and it's CG, but everything looks like it's hand painted. That actually begun to be employed there during the animation process of the Clone Wars. And so what you're talking about animation upgrade is a whole new way of doing CG animation that was sort of pioneered during the show,
Yeah, but
and you
you'll
can really see it. It makes a big difference.
yeah,
The CG before that was more like the Pixar era, like the Incredibles looking CG, and then after that you have more of like the Arcane looking CG.
yeah, and you'll see it very easily if you watch the show. About halfway through season 3, Padme or not Padme, Ahsoka stops wearing the tube top and starts wearing real Jedi clothes. Anakin and
Yeah,
Obi-Wan's
everything
hair,
changed.
Anakin's hair looks much more realistic without being too realistic because the Clone Wars is not realistic animation, but it looks better, is what I'm saying. It looks less like blocky. Um,
And it gets more serious. Another thing to notice about the Clone Wars is that I always thought it was really clever how they every 3 episodes, almost across the board, every 3 episodes is a movie. So each one is like 23 minutes long, and if you add 3 of them up, then you get like a
they
short
did
movie
have
of
a
hour and
couple.
10, hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah, they did have a couple of standalone episodes. They had several that were
Couple, yep.
two, had a few that were two
But for the
episodes,
most part,
but a lot of them
they're
were
all
three or
trilogies.
four. So you do have to, yeah, you kind of have to watch them all in order, and you also have to keep in mind that the Clone Wars is not told in chronological order. There were several,
Right.
yeah, yeah. There were the first few episodes take place after a few episodes that get shown later on. So it's not in
That's
chronological order. Yeah, if you look it up, and there
I
is a,
watched the whole thing. I watched all 7 seasons, and I didn't notice that.
I mean, I know that if you look it up, and I don't have the,
I
I like,
believe you.
yeah, they talked about it. It's a little bit disjointed, and I felt that watching it the first time, and it's because there are some things that were told out of order, but it's not like a huge deal. It doesn't make the show not make sense or anything like that. Um, but yes, what you said before,
Anyway,
the show definitely gets more serious. Season 4 has one of the best finales, or not season 4 is good, but season 5 has my favorite finale of the series. And I loved all of season 7. Season
yeah,
7 was fantastic.
season
With
7 was awesome.
the last
Yeah,
four
it really
episodes,
delivered.
the last 4 episodes take place concurrently with episode 3, Attack of the Revenge of the
Yeah, and if
Sith.
you're a Star Wars fan, those last 4 episodes, if you're a Star Wars fan, and if you follow the Clone Wars up to that point, they are edge of your seat, jaw on the floor episodes, all 4 of them, almost all the way through. There's so many
Yeah.
huge things that happen there, things that explain things in the movie, things that enrich your whole Star Wars experience, tie everything together, and big moves for the dynamic characters to go through. Big previews of things to come.
Yeah.
It's definitely worth watching.
Yeah. Highly recommend.
But back to Revenge of the Sith,
Yeah.
though.
So
I mean, this is obviously part of the same story, but I think where we left off was Anakin getting let's just cut to the chase. Anakin getting implanted as a spy
yeah.
in the Jedi inner circle,
Yeah, I was trying to
and
think about what kind of happens next,
basically
and
the
I got
Jedi
lost.
thinking that they're using Anakin. The Jedi thought that they were going to use Anakin as a pawn to get under Palpatine's skin, but all the while Palpatine is doing the exact same thing to them, using Anakin the other way, and
Yeah.
he's the one that's actually doing it more effectively because Anakin is more on his side than he is on the Jedi Council side.
Yeah. But
And
all
it's
of it,
hard to blame him. Like I definitely am not a person that wants to give excuses to bad guys, but it is hard, like if as you watch, especially the Attack of the Clones, um it's really hard to blame Anakin for feeling a little butthurt by all these guys that were supposed to be his family and his mentors, and he gets disrespected a lot, and he knows that he's more capable than most of them. He knows that, and we know it's true. He gets especially by Obi-Wan himself. He gets disrespected so often by Obi-Wan. I'm not
I
saying that a master needs to respect his student. I'm saying, how about a little common courtesy? Anakin or Obi-Wan always felt like he was putting him in his place.
Yeah, but at the same time, I felt like Anakin was being a whiny brat about not being made a master. Like, I mean, you're on the council. Like, take the win.
Uh,
You
yeah,
know,
I
okay,
agree.
okay, so
Yeah,
technically
I
you're not a
agree.
master. You're still the youngest person to ever be put on the council. Be happy. I would
Yeah,
have slapped him upside the
whoever
head.
said whoever said you're on the council, you're supposed to sit among the council.
Yeah,
That was the idea,
Palpatine.
is that we're letting you into the council, not the council of us people, but the council, the wisdom, the thoughts that we are sharing with each other. We're letting you be privy to that, and that's a very privileged thing to be exposed to, and a thing to be welcomed into the circle of.
And that's what they should have said. And that's my biggest complaint, that Yoda should have said something, especially because he could sense, not through his Jedi powers, but just looking at Anakin, he should have been able to say,
Yeah,
like,
but
I
it
know you're kind of upset because we're not making you a master, but look, Palpatine doesn't make choices on who gets put in the council. We're letting you on the council because we trust you, but we're not making you a master because you're not supposed to be on the council yet. So be happy and stop pouting. But he
But I
doesn't
guess
say that, and
that's the whole point that I'm making, is that they deliberately made everything look more forced, because we do have to get along with the story, and it's an incredibly complicated story. We have lots and lots of steps to go through in the next half hour to get where we need to be. And so Anakin overreacts with the this is unfair baloney, and then the council sits there and stares at him like, well, don't you feel stupid now, instead of softening the blow like you're describing. So I think that that's why it feels a little forced. It feels a little Saturday cartoon, because we're trying to accomplish some very deep emotional beats here, and we're doing it in just too little of time, trying to squeeze it into one movie.
hey everyone, that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank you all for listening. Tonight, next week, we will continue our discussion on Revenge of the Sith. And in the meantime, please click like and subscribe if you haven't already. Enjoy the rest of your week, and remember, make tomorrow better than yesterday.